In this video, we're going to be looking at part 2 of the IELTS speaking test. In fact, we're going to be looking at the sample answer that we planned in the previous video. If you haven't watched that video, it'd be worth looking at because we went through the planning stage where we were coming up with some ideas and vocabulary to help us answer the task card that we were looking at in that video. Today we're going to think about the full answer for that task card. I'll show you the full answer and then we can give it a quick analysis of why it's a very high level part 2 response. Now, the task card that we were looking at, if you remember, was this one. It's asking us to describe a tourist attraction we enjoyed visiting. So if you remember, in the previous video, we came up with the idea of the Masai Mara National Reserve. So what we're going to do now is look at the full answer. I'll just go through the full answer, read it out to you. Of course, you can listen, try and notice the things that I'm doing that would kind of impress the examiner. Notice a lot of the vocabulary that we came up with in the previous video is being used in the answer. After I've done that, I'll just give it a quick analysis and explain why it's a very high level answer, the kind of answer that a band 9 level student would give. So let's go ahead. Let's look at the full answer. Here we go. I'm going to talk about one of my favorite places I visited on holiday, which is the Masai Mara National Reserve. This is a massive area of land in southwestern Kenya that's home to animals such as lions, cheetahs, elephants, zebras, and hippos. In the Masai Mara, you can see spectacular rolling savanna plains and breathtaking vistas as the setting for its exciting array of wild animals. I went there with a couple of close friends when I was 18 on my gap year before going to university. We went on the trip full of excitement, and Kenya was the first country on our itinerary. One of the most popular things for people to do when visiting Kenya is to go on safari. So, as we were adventurous teenagers, we decided to book a cheap camping safari that promised to be a special experience. When we were on the safari, we spent most of the time in the safety of a big jeep. The park ranger drove us around the reserve looking for as many different animals as possible. We saw lots of amazing sights, even though the ride was a bit bumpy at times. I remember at one point we were racing as fast as possible to an area where a leopard was chasing down an antelope. We got there just as the leopard made its kill. It's something I'll never forget. The safari was amazing for so many reasons. The wild and rugged landscape together with the incredible animals made it a unique adventure. One particular moment I enjoyed was a sunset one evening when the beauty and size of the Masai Mara was overwhelming. These kind of awe-inspiring views were commonplace on the trip, and the majestic creatures dotting the landscape only made it more outstanding. So there we go. That's the end of the response. You can see that was a nice full response, kind of filling the 2 minutes of speaking time you get in part 2. And it covered all 4 points on the cue card. So it was a nice full answer, full response. And it gave a lot of detail about this trip or the tourist attraction, the Masai Mara National Reserve. Hopefully you notice the use of a lot of adjectives as well. This is a describing task in part 2 of the IELTS speaking test. So really to describe something well, you need to be using lots of adjectives. Hopefully you noticed some interesting adjectives being used in that response. And what we can do just quickly now is go through the response just sentence by sentence, but not spending too long on each sentence. But I want to point out some things that kind of make the answer really quite good. So if you see in the first sentence, I just introduced the task. We did this by paraphrasing the task statement a bit, and it's important you try to do this. You can see I've said I'm going to talk about one of my favorite places I visited on holiday. So we didn't use the phrase a place I enjoyed visiting, but one of my favorite places I visited. So we've changed it slightly from the task statement. You don't want to be just reading exactly what it says on that topic card that you get. So there we go. That's all I've done there is I've introduced the place. And at the end of that sentence, I've linked it with which and said, which is the Masai Mara National Reserve. Then I go on and I explain what this place is a bit more. I've said this is a massive area of land. Nice adjective there, massive, meaning really big, a bit of a less common adjective for people to use there, in southwestern Kenya. And then I've explained some of the animals that you can see in that place. And I've used the phrase, that's home to. Really just a nice kind of idiomatic phrase there that we can use when we're describing a place. And then finally, in that part, I've gone on and I've said, in the Masai Mara, you can see spectacular rolling savanna plains. Now, this is a phrase I came up with in last week's video in the planning, and we've managed to use it. We've also added the adjective spectacular to it, meaning kind of amazing. And also the phrase breathtaking vistas. Now, we came up with that last week and we've managed to include it in the answer. And also just at the end there as the setting for an exciting array of wild animals. So yes, exciting array meaning like a range of wild animals there. So really those sentences were focused on the first point, what this tourist attraction is. So I fully expanded on that before I go on to the next cue. And that's the idea, right? Each of these cues on the topic card is going to kind of be like a paragraph of information. And then I move on to the next point, which is when and why you visited it. And if you remember, I just explained that at first by saying I went with a couple of close friends. And I included that information I came up with last time, which was, well, 18 years old and being on my gap year. So just introducing that point, you will notice here we're moving into using the past tenses rather than the present tenses. That first cue I focused on the present tense because it's a place that exists now, but then I'm moving on and talking about the time that I went there, so we're using the past tense. The next sentence, nothing too complex there. We went on the trip full of excitement using the noun form of the adjective exciting, which we've already used. And Kenya was the first country on our itinerary. Itinerary just meaning our plan that we had for when we went there. And then I mentioned that, of course, one of the most popular things for people to do is to go on safari. So just adding a bit of information there about things that people like to do there. And then, of course, that we did that thing. So as we were adventurous teenagers. Okay, so using that nice bit of vocabulary there, nice adjective to describe us at the time, we were adventurous. So we decided to book a cheap camping safari that promised to be a special experience. So again, another adjective there, special. But you can see this response is really full of really useful descriptive adjectives. But that is the end of the kind of response to that second cue, which was when and why I visited it. Then we move on to the third cue, which was what you did there. Now, again, I just explained that in as much detail as I can before moving on to the next cue. First, I just say when we were on the safari, we spent most of the time in the safety of a big Jeep. Nothing too complex there. The park ranger drove us around the reserve looking for as many different animals as possible. So we're just explaining there what we did there, the main thing that we were doing. Then in the next sentence, we saw lots of amazing sights. Another nice adjective noun collocation there. Nice use of the adjective amazing. Even though the ride was a bit bumpy. Now, that's what I came up with last week in the planning video, was the bumpy ride. But we changed that around a bit and we said the ride was a bit bumpy at times. And then we haven't finished. I remember at one point we were racing as fast as possible to an area where a leopard was chasing down an antelope. So we're just explaining one specific memory that we've got of something that happened there. We've used a phrasal verb there, to chase down. Now, in the context of an animal hunting another animal, this is an appropriate choice of phrasal verbs. There's some nice idiomatic language there. And then the final sentence in the response to that third cue is we got there just as the leopard made its kill. It's something I'll never forget. Now, got the phrase there, made its kill. And again, good collocation there, to make a kill in the context of, again, an animal hunting another animal. That's a good collocation to make. And you can see a lot of uses of the past tenses there when I'm explaining this experience in the past. Then we move to the final cue, which is explain why you enjoyed visiting this tourist attraction. So again, you can see this final cue. It's not, you don't have to cover this final cue. A lot of students will panic about whether they cover every single cue, but it's useful to get to this final cue because it's often about feeling and describing kind of why you like something or why you enjoyed something. You can see in the response, there is a lot of interesting adjectives in this kind of part of the response. Now, you can see here, the safari was amazing for so many reasons. And then I use some of the phrases we came up with last week. The wild and rugged landscape. So again, using more adjectives to describe what we're looking at when we're there. With the incredible animals. So incredible, another adjective, but here to describe the animals rather than the scenery. Made it a unique adventure. Another adjective, unique, and describing the time that we were there as the adventure, unique adventure. Then in the next sentence, I again recall a specific moment. One particular moment I enjoyed was a sunset one evening when the beauty and size of the Masai Mara was overwhelming. So I mentioned the beauty and size here, nouns instead of adjectives, but then I described them as being overwhelming. Another nice adjective to describe this experience. Then finally, I just say these kind of awe-inspiring views. So again, I'm using another adjective describing the views and the scenery that I'm looking at were commonplace. So very, very normal on the trip. And the majestic creatures. So again, describing the animals, not using the word animals this time, using the word creatures and using the adjective majestic, dotting the landscape. Here, the word dot here is, of course, taken from the verb, putting an ing on the end, but this just means kind of randomly placed on the landscape. So in different areas, when you look at the view, you can see those animals. And then only made it more outstanding, finishing there with a nice adjective, outstanding, to describe the experience that we had on the trip. So there we go. You can see there really from me going through it why it's a high level response. It's full of really good descriptive language. It fully kind of covers what is asked of us on the task card, and it's probably going to fill that 2 minutes completely. So a really high level response there. Hopefully this response and looking at it was helpful for you, and it can help you with your own response to this kind of task card. Of course, you can't just memorize this and take it into the test and say it's not about you, but you can use it, and some of the ideas, some of the vocabulary you can use to adapt to your own response to this task card. So hopefully it was useful for you. If it was, then do remember to click the like button. It does help. And also, if you haven't already, then remember to click the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any similar videos in the future. So there we go. Thanks for watching, guys, and see you again in the next video.